I, 38, male, have been divorced from my ex-wife, 36, female, for 5 years now. We have a 7-year-old son, too. We'd been married for 3 years, but we just weren't compatible with each other. And after trying really hard for 2 years, just for the sake of our son, I realized that this marriage was a mistake and decided to end things. She wasn't happy with me either and agreed to the divorce, so that was that. We have joint custody of our son and have been co parenting him ever since we separated, and while it hasn't been easy, we still do our best. Our son spends the year alternating between living with his mother and me, which we thought would be easier for him as opposed to moving places every few weeks. He'll spend 1 month with me and the next with my ex wife, and that works for all of us. Recently, I got engaged to my girlfriend of 2 years, and I'm getting married in 2 months. Now, the issue is that my ex wife is supposed to be the one who gets to live with our son that month, and she's completely against the idea of our son attending my wedding. She, for whatever reason, believes that he'll be emotionally hurt if he has to watch his father marry another woman. I don't buy that theory at all, since last month, while my son was living with me, he kept telling me how excited he was to be a part of a wedding for the first time in his life. He was supposed to be my ring bearer, and he'd been practicing for a while. It didn't seem like he was concerned about anything else. Besides, he was just 2 years old when we separated, so I highly doubt that he even remembers us ever being together. Even when he was a kid, my ex-wife and I used to sleep in separate rooms and kept as far away from each other as possible because we didn't want to start fighting in front of our baby. So I don't think he thought of us as a married couple, even at two, but more as roommates who take care of him turn by turn. My son has also known my fiance for a little over a year now and loves her. So he's definitely not bothered about the woman I'm getting married to. I'm pretty sure this is just a last-ditch attempt by my wife to stop my wedding from happening at all. Like I said, my wife and I never particularly got along well after we got married. While we were dating, we used to be pretty okay and relaxed, but as soon as we got married, she pulled a complete 180 on me. She would yell at me over the pettiest stuff. She'd make fun of me in front of all her friends and never had a word of appreciation for me. When she was pregnant, I was trying to go above and beyond to be helpful, but she'd just snap at me and tell me to leave her alone. So I did that. And even then, she'd complain that I wasn't doing enough for her. I guess that's the time that I sort of gave up any hope of making our marriage work because clearly the way she was treating me showed me just how little I meant to her. I thought our son's birth would somehow bring us closer, but instead we grew apart even more after he was born, and gradually both of us realized that this marriage was done for. That was almost 5 years ago, and I think both of us have moved on with our lives. I sure have. I don't know about her. She's always kept me on my toes, though. After our divorce, I didn't want much to do with her, but since she was the mother of our son, I couldn't cut her off entirely. She'd had several boyfriends after our divorce and would make sure that she taught our son to tell me about it, probably in an attempt to make me jealous. Earlier, it used to bother me, but now I simply don't care, and I think that's what gets to her. Ever since I started dating my fiance, my ex-wife has been acting increasingly weird about every little thing and tries to pick fights with me constantly. I've tried my very best, but now I just can't do this anymore. She's getting on my very last nerve at this point. I called her up a few days back and tried to have a civil discussion with her as to why she thinks our son isn't ready for my marriage, and she kept on saying that she could just sense it as a mother. That was literally all she had to say on the matter, even though I'd explained to her several times that our son has shown nothing but excitement. After a while, she got frustrated and said that she's just not going to allow our son to attend my wedding, and there's nothing I can do about it. So I'll just have to accept it and deal with it. Then she hung up and refused to talk to me after that. I was pretty annoyed with this whole situation as well, and to be honest, I didn't want to deal with my ex-wife's antics before my wedding, so I made a huge decision. I decided to file for full custody of our son. Of course, I discussed it with my fiancée first before doing anything, and she said that she'd be more than happy to have my son around all the time since she'd really warmed up to him. I also spoke to my son about it, and I thought that it would be a difficult conversation, but it really wasn't. I sat him down and asked him if he had the option to choose between living with one of us throughout the year, who would he pick? I left the choice entirely up to him, and he was very confident about his answer. His dad. He even went on to explain that when he lives with his mom, she never has enough time to play with him and is either working or out. So he ends up spending most of the day with his nanny, who isn't really as fun as me. I was confused about what he meant by his mother being out. But of course, my son wouldn't know where she goes, so I left it at that and didn't pester him more. I was obviously thrilled that he wanted to live with me, but I still wasn't sure if this was the right time, though, since I was literally getting married, but my fiancée reassured me that she'd make it work. She reassured me that she'd postpone the wedding if the legal battle got too tough for me, but as of now, my son should be my priority. I really do think I lucked out because both my fiancé and son were so understanding and kind. So without thinking twice, I spoke to my lawyer and filed for full custody. Yesterday, my wife received a notice and called me up. She was livid, to put it mildly. Within seconds of me answering the call, she started screaming at me, and I heard her out patiently until she finally stopped for breath. I told her that I did what I had to do to make sure that my son didn't miss a milestone in his life, and she had several opportunities to step back and let us have this, but she didn't. So now she has to face the consequences of her actions. She was really upset and told me that I was making a mountain out of a molehill and that my son not attending my wedding wasn't going to be the end of the world. She even told me that I was overreacting and said that as his father, it was my duty to protect him from things that might hurt him emotionally, and I was doing the opposite of what I was supposed to do, which is why she had to intervene in the first place. I was in no mood to argue with her and just hung up since clearly she wasn't going to change her mind, so we'd have to settle this legally. She keeps texting me about it though and is convinced that I'm being selfish. She sent me at least 50 texts about this by now, and I know that she's really torn up about this. But if she really values her time with her son, then maybe she should have made more of an attempt to bond with him. Now, even our son doesn't want to spend the year with his mom, so I don't really see how this is my fault entirely. AITA for filing for full custody of my son after my ex-wife refused to let him attend my wedding? Update 1. My ex-wife called me up again a few hours ago. I think it's been one day since she received the notice and she's been intolerable. I answered the call, and this time she was crying and practically begging me not to do this to her. I really did feel sorry for her and had half a mind to withdraw the petition, but decided to speak to her about what my son had told me. I still didn't know what he'd meant when he said that she'd be out most of the time. I'd thought that maybe she'd be going out on dates, but even realistically, she couldn't have more than 2 or 3 dates a week, and my son had very clearly stated that she'd be out almost every other day. So I confronted her about it, and initially, she told me that she had no idea what he was talking about, and tried to convince me that she stayed with him most of the time, but she'd always been a bad liar, and I could tell that she wasn't being honest. So I decided to give her another chance to come clean about where she'd go, and that's when she finally told me the truth. So apparently around a year ago, she started seeing this guy who happened to be the son of the CEO of the company she'd met a few months ago at a work event. He was smitten with her, but since he was significantly younger than her, they decided to keep things under wraps. But then a few months ago, he decided to introduce her to his parents so that they could build a future together since they were getting pretty serious. The parents were not really sure about whether she was fit to be a part of their family or not in typical rich snob fashion. So she was having dinner with them quite often and spending a significant amount of time at his place to make sure that his parents liked her. Her boyfriend and even his parents were aware of the fact that she had a young son, and around the time of my wedding, they'd wanted to take her and our son on a family vacation to bond. Now, she couldn't tell them that our son had to attend my wedding, since their only condition before even meeting her was that the father shouldn't be in the picture, since that would create unnecessary drama among their friends and relatives. It was bad enough for them that their son had picked an ordinary single mother who was older than him. They didn't want the added burden of having to deal with an ex-husband as well. Her boyfriend had to put his foot down and fight really hard against his parents to persuade them to even consider allowing him to see her, since otherwise he was at risk of being cut off and he couldn't afford that. So she and her boyfriend had lied and told his parents that her ex-husband wasn't in the picture at all, which was a pretty stupid move for them because now they were stuck in their own lie. They told his parents that she took care of her son all by herself and had never been in touch with me ever since I walked out on her while she was pregnant. So she had absolutely no way to explain why exactly she couldn't bring her son on the vacation they'd planned, since at that time our son would be at my wedding. So she tried to stop him from attending, but that had backfired in the worst possible way, and now she was caught in the middle of a custody battle that she couldn't even explain to her future in-laws. So she and her boyfriend were in a horrible situation, which is why she was so desperate to stop me. I didn't even know how to respond to that because I'd expected a lot of petty reasons, but not this, not in the slightest. After a few minutes of silence, I told her that I needed some time to think about it and that I'd tell her my decision later. It's been a couple of hours since I spoke to her, and I have absolutely no idea what to make of things right now. I'm pretty sure that I still don't want my son going back to live with his mother, since she's made it pretty clear that she wants to spend more time with her boyfriend and his family rather than her own son. But then I'm also sure that going through with the whole custody thing is going to effectively ruin my ex-wife's life, like she herself told me. I don't know if I can live with something as heavy as that on my conscience, because even though she and I aren't exactly the best of friends, she's still been a huge part of my life. And I don't think I can just hurt her so bad and then move on with my life as if it's nothing. Honestly, this is such a complicated situation that I don't know what the right thing to do is either. I spoke to my fiancée about it, and even though she seemed confused and lost, she told me that no matter what, I should always put my son first. My ex-wife is an adult and can deal with her problems herself, so my only concern should be my son. She didn't really tell me what to do exactly, but I'm sort of sure that I know what she wants me to do. This is a huge decision that I'm supposed to make, and I guess I'm going to take a few days to think about it before doing anything. I haven't promised my ex-wife anything either, so that's good for me, I suppose. Update 2. It's been a week since I filed for full custody, and in spite of my ex-wife's sob story, I've decided to stick to my decision. I thought about it long and hard and concluded that my ex-wife's priorities were not in order. If she wants to impress her boyfriend's parents and be in their good books, then that's her decision. But she's pushing our son aside for her own selfish reasons, so I don't see any valid reason as to why I shouldn't demand full custody. She wants to be with her boyfriend more than she wants to be with her son. That's really not my fault. And it's not as though our son hasn't picked up on it. He definitely knows that his mother isn't giving him the kind of attention that we are, which is why even he's not feeling really connected to her. So I think my decision to file for full custody was really fair. Of course, it seems fair to me, but the second I told my ex-wife about my decision, she flipped out on me. 2 days ago, I told her that I was not going to change my mind and that her best bet would be just to tell her boyfriend's parents the truth and deal with the consequences, since technically it really is her fault. And she wouldn't be in this situation if she and her boyfriend had been transparent and honest. She started screaming at me on the phone so loudly that I actually had to hold it away from my ear out of fear that my eardrums would be damaged. That's how loud and hysterical she was. She told me that her boyfriend was at risk of getting cut out of his parents' life and would lose his inheritance if he refused to follow their orders, and she couldn't just come clean. I told her that that was her own problem. I only had our son's best interests at heart, and he clearly wanted to be with me. I wasn't even being vindictive. I was just trying to be a good dad. But my ex-wife couldn't take that and accused me of doing this on purpose so that I could ruin her and her boyfriend's life because I was jealous of how rich she'd be if she did end up getting married to this guy. Now, that was laughable since I myself make a comfortable living and am getting married in a few weeks to the woman I love. So I don't know what exactly I should feel jealous of. Besides, I couldn't care less about who she marries or who she dates, and I told her so as well. But she just wasn't ready to believe it. She called me every single cuss word she was aware of and didn't stop until I forcefully cut her off mid-sentence and told her that this unstable behavior of hers was just more proof to me that I was doing the right thing. I wished her good luck with her boyfriend's situation and hung up and then blocked her, since I didn't want anything to do with her anymore at this point. Update 3. So, almost a month has passed since my last update, and a lot of things have happened since then. Around 5 days back, my ex-wife called me up and asked if my fiancé and I would be willing to legally adopt our son, and also told me that she was willing to sign away her parental rights as long as she had visitation rights. She didn't want to get caught up in the legal custody battle since she felt like she was fighting a losing battle. I was really surprised by this turn of events because up until that day she'd remained firm on her stance and was willing to fight for custody no matter what. So this sudden change was really weird. I told her that I talked to my fiancé about it and let her know, and she thanked me and then hung up without another word. I couldn't make sense of what had just happened since she'd been hysterical about the custody of our son the last time we'd spoken. And now she was acting as if this was no big deal for her and that she was totally fine with seeing her son once or twice a month. I spoke to my fiancé about the adoption, nevertheless, and she agreed readily and quite enthusiastically as well. So far, our son had been living with us, and now it looked like this was going to be our permanent arrangement since he was scheduled to go to his mom's place a couple of days ago, but she never bothered to come to pick him up and told me that he was free to live with me now onwards so that he could take his time to get accustomed to his new arrangement. Something was just really, really off about this whole behavior of hers, and I could tell that something fishy was going on. I even asked her if she was sure about this multiple times, but she kept reassuring me that this was for the best and she was just doing what was good for our son, keeping her own ego aside. I wasn't satisfied with that answer, so I decided to do some digging and eventually got to my ex-wife's boyfriend. He was a lot younger than us, probably in his mid-20s, and seemed easy enough to manipulate, so I reached out to him on social media and told him that I wanted to play a party for my ex-wife since she was being so understanding about this whole custody thing, and I really was grateful to her. The poor guy fell for it and even agreed to meet me without telling my ex-wife about it. So a couple of days back, we met at a bar and I kept ordering drinks for him while he kept chugging them while we planned for this party that was never going to happen in the first place. After a while, when he seemed sloshed enough, I decided to bring up the whole custody thing once more, and by then he was so drunk that he would have probably told me his card details if I'd asked. So he started laughing and telling me about how they'd confessed to his parents about how they'd lied, and my ex-wife still kept in touch with me since we were co-parenting our son. She also told them about the custody battle and that his parents came up with a supposedly respectable solution to this whole thing. They gave my ex-wife an ultimatum and told her that they'd let their son marry her on the condition that she'd keep her past life private and try to appear much younger than her age when in public. They wanted her to give up her parental rights and do away with the whole single mother thing altogether, so that when she got married to their son, she'd have a clean slate and nobody would ever have to know anything about her. It was either that or goodbye to her boyfriend. And after several weeks of arguing against it, my wife finally chose to have a new life over her son. Her boyfriend was obviously thrilled about it and even told me how glad he was that she'd picked him and not her son, since he definitely wouldn't have parted ways with his parents and given up his inheritance for her sake. So she was a much bigger person than him, and then went on to laugh about it drunkenly while I processed all that I'd learned that evening. After a while, when her boyfriend had fallen asleep at the bar and it was pretty late as well, I went out and called my ex-wife. I told her where we were and said that she needed to come and pick up her boyfriend, and also told her that I knew the full truth now. Disgust and anger were the only two things I felt towards her at that point. She tried to defend her decision, but I wasn't having any of it. She'd made her choice once and for all, and there was no outsmarting me anymore. I couldn't even believe that she tried to fool me into believing that she was trying to look out for our son, which is why she was giving up her rights, when it was all just to ensure that she'd be able to marry into that rich brat's family. So I told her, now that she'd dug her grave, she had to lie in it, and she wouldn't be getting any visits in the future. The saddest part was that once I told her that, she agreed to it. Even though she sounded dejected and upset, she still agreed to it, and that was all that I needed to know, that I'd made the right choice by keeping my son away from his mother. That was a few days ago and was the last time I spoke to my wife. Currently, my fiance and I are currently in the process of adopting him, so we've pushed our wedding up as well. It's stressful, but my son's happy, and that's all that matters to us, if I'm being honest. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.